Thank you.
Toastmaster Kalani, the speech title is I Know Who You Are. I Know Who You Are, Toastmaster Kalani.
Thank you very much. Good evening again, fellow Toastmasters and esteemed guests.
Good evening. Good evening.
Imagine walking into a corporate event, a very important seminar, or in fact, the DTAC. You see someone very familiar, and you go on thinking, I know who you are. Yet how much ever you try to recall, you cannot put a name to that face. To make matters worse, he walks up to you and calls you by the name. Hello, Toastmaster Alvin, how have you been? How much ever gregarious you can be, that moment you want to disappear into thin air because you have no idea who you are speaking to. Fellow Toastmasters and guests, I was in that situation a decade ago. This was a time when I was studying in Japan. Forget about remembering names. All the people's faces looked exactly the same to me. Right? One day, I was coming back from a vacation, back from my spring break. I was coming up the elevator. Suddenly, this cheerful girl comes up to me, waves, and she goes on, hello, Kalani-chan, how have you been? I saw your photos on Facebook. I saw you had a great vacation. How was it? And I wanted to disappear. I had no idea who the hell she was. And this was my situation for a couple of more months. Now, the first picture is my friend Yurika-chan. Then we have Jinzi-chan and Amy-chan. And all of them looked exactly the same to me, however different features they had. Unfortunately, when it was moved to the slides, two other pictures have disappeared. But there were two other faces which I could hardly distinguish, let alone remember the names. Now, has anyone thought, why does this happen? I'm sure all of you have faced this as well. One reason is episodic memory impairment. What does it mean? That is, when memory is unable to provide us with the necessary cues to remember a certain past event. The other one is ORE, other race effect. Raise your hand if you have heard this term.
No.
Nobody. So that's something very interesting. That means that is a phenomenon that relates to remembering the faces of your own race better than the other race. Interesting, right? So, University of Glasgow did a research on this. They looked at the brain's response changing with repeated exposure to the same race and other race faces. So what they did was they had created target groups and they gave them pictures of different race people and tried to identify. So what they understood was all the target groups found it more easier to identify the faces of their own race. This was reflected in the EEG scanning as well. So there's something called N170 component related to EEG, which shows your brain activity when it is associated with identifying faces or similar activity. So when it was tested for this target groups, they found that when the participants were given a face of the same image, a face of the same race for the second time, they saw there was the EEG was decreased significantly, but not when they were shown a face of a different race. So that means your brain is actively trying to process the features of another race person when you see them for the second time. Now, second research was again done by the same university. They wanted to find out how this ORE or other race effect was developed, at what age. So what they did was they used infants. In fact, Chinese infants who are 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. These infants were exposed to 3 different racial groups: Chinese, African, and Caucasian. Interesting enough, the 3-month-olds demonstrated recognition in all conditions, all the races. When it came to 6 months, they could recognize Caucasian, Chinese, but not the African. And when they tested with the 9 months, they were limited to Chinese faces. So what does it tell us? It tells us as we grow older, we start to develop some bias, which was even depicted in the infants. How do we overcome this ORE? Remembering our friends, colleagues, people that we meet is very important for human relationships. And to overcome ORE, we need to immerse ourselves in different cultures. That is what you are doing, joining Toastmasters, coming to the meetings, because you meet people from diversified cultures. And you have to avoid stereotypes. You have to give up on the racial traits, and then you need to focus on the personal traits instead. And you avoid bias. So, next time that you meet somebody new, try to associate that face with an incident, a location, a color, a type of the day, rainy day, etc. That helps the brain to remember, associate that face with those cues and remember better. So, that's how we beat ORE. Over to you, TM Modi.